Welcome, everybody, to Beyond the Shadows. I'm author and ghost historian Mike Ricksecker. Yes, one of these days I will get the intro music inserted back into here like we had before. So we had a fantastic episode on Edge of the Rabbit Hole just a little while ago. Our great friend Rob Guttrow was back with us, reminiscing a little bit about the old days. Rob and I go, about 8 years back in some old inspired ghost tracking, paranormal investigation. So it was great to have him on. Something I did forget to mention in that show, we'll take care of this, a little bit of housekeeping here right at the beginning before we roll into paranormal television shows. Behind the camera, what happens behind the scenes. That's what's up on tap. But this Thursday, we have a special live show coming to you from right here on the Edge of the Rabbit Hole channel, brought to you, of course, by Haunted Road Media. We're going to have Alexandra Holzer will be back with us with her mother, who is she's a lot of different things. She's a Russian countess. She's an amazing artist. Of course, she was married to Hans Holzer. We'll talk a little bit about those paranormal investigations as well. She has a ton of things going on. An amazing, very classy woman. We're going to have both of them on the show Thursday night, 7:30 Eastern time. So make the adjustments for whatever time zone you're in. It'd be 6:30 my time. If you're on the West Coast, it'll be 4:30 p.m. But 7:30 p.m. this Thursday. That's, what is that, the 14th? We're going to be having Alexandra and her mother. That's going to be wonderful. It's going to be absolutely wonderful. So be sure to tune in for that. So what I wanted to cover tonight is something, a little off color, a little fun. I get asked a lot about the different, paranormal television shows. We talked about some of that last night on a interview that I was on, and so it was like, hey, let's go over some of these things since the last time I talked about it a couple of years ago. Some other things have changed, and yes, I will talk about the Ghost Adventures thing. I'm not going to get into all of that. We have another video out on the Haunted Road Media YouTube channel about all of that. We'll get to that in a little while. Go ahead, of course, if you have any questions about television shows, how things work, all that, throw them down in the chat. Of course, if you're listening to this on Spotify or something else later on the podcast, then you won't have the opportunity to throw in those questions. But on the YouTube channel here, you do. Candy Orton, tell us all the tea, Mike. Okay. Well, I have tea right here. Actually, I switched from the Haunted Road Roast to coffee. We'll do this for Tim Schoen real quick. This episode of Beyond the Shadows is brought to you by Haunted Road Roast. It helps you hunt ghosts. Although I'm drinking tea right now. For the second show, sometimes we'll drink coffee, but sometimes we'll go to tea, kind of soothe the throat. It's actually, when you're doing shows like this, it's actually a little bit better for the tea than the coffee. So there you go. Victoria Monday, our television behind the scenes. That's my life. Well, Robert Hanna right off the bat asked, Mike, will you appear in Alaska Triangle Season 2? Well, right now, there haven't been any discussions yet about Alaska Triangle Season 2, at least as far as I know. I know that talking with a lot of the guys like Johnny Enoch, Jeremy Ray, we had Adam Davies on last week, other guys that were on the show. We would love to do a season 2. There's a lot more to tackle and explore up there in Alaska. So if that opportunity comes our way, we would be happy to jump on it. It's been a very popular show on the Travel Channel. They've been running the reruns, and every time it happens, I get hit up with all kinds of people saying, hey, I see you on TV, you love the show, et cetera, which is great. So the feedback has been wonderful. So let's go ahead and talk about that. Victoria M. Honey, whiskey, and lemon juice helps with throat too. I did put some lemon juice in here. So we'll start with the Alaska Triangle, and this is like literally behind the camera, right? Because the camera is in my face. It was a great time. So it was Wild Dream Entertainment that actually produced the show and invited me up there to Alaska to talk about portals, ley lines, electromagnetic activity, different paranormal and supernatural phenomena that happens up there. We talked earthquakes and volcanoes, kind of my experiences when I first came up there. We were up on the side of that mountain pretty much all day. We were up there in the morning, broke for lunch, came back, filmed some more. So for the amount of hours that we were up there, only a small amount actually got used. Of course, on the television show, that's pretty much the way it goes. Kind of some things that you don't see here is like what I'm sitting on. So that's basically one of their. You see the guys sitting on cases, right? Basically they have me sitting on a case too. That's the way it worked. So it wasn't exactly comfortable. But they had the fantastic backdrop there with the mountains and everything. I have put out this photograph. So I'm going to be offering this on my website, MikeRicksecker.com. This is, really it's a selfie, but everybody really liked this photo of the mountains and the path and everything behind me. So that's gonna be coming up here pretty soon. But these guys are really great. They would do crazy things. Like, okay, here they are. This is the crew. They're hanging out in the trees. It looks like they're being silly, but they're really not. They're actually lining up some really cool shots. These guys would get like really artistic with their camera angles. And if you've seen the show, the cinematography is great. A lot of the angles and shots that they got were wonderful. And so, they were lining up stuff like this, like through the brambles, and there I am holding the dowsing rods. And what's interesting is Johnny Enoch actually asked me about this type of vegetation being around there in areas with electromagnetic activity, where he has seen that at a lot of these different sites. So it was kind of interesting to be able for him to ask me that question without even knowing, and then being able to confirm for him that at least up there that was the case. So Victoria Monday has a good question here. So do they still shoot on film, or is it all digital now? Do you have a prompter, or did you have to memorize it all? So it was all digital. They were having to switch out memory cards and all that as we went along. They had a couple of different cameras. Most of it was 4K. They did have to at one point switch to an HD because the type of memory cards that they have sometimes they won't always work in a 4K, so they had to switch to HD right at the end. And I think that's a lot of the footage that ended up getting scrapped. Was those interviews on the HD. I could be wrong, but a lot of that stuff at the end of the day did not get used. And that's where there's a couple of clips, like real quick clips thrown into a couple of those episodes where you see me with, it's a different angle, a different background. I think there's like 2 real quick clips like that. And that's some of that ending interview footage. They didn't use a lot of that. As far as having a prompter, no, there's no prompter. I'll go back to that photo. So basically, what's going on here is, the guy in the blue has he has the camera, or basically I take it back. It's the guy in the black jacket sitting on the case. He's running the camera. The guy in the blue is asking me questions, and then the audio guy is squatting down. There was no prompter whatsoever. So basically, I'm just sitting there and they're asking me questions, or they're saying, talk about this subject. And it's just me talking about Alaska, the Alaska Triangle, electromagnetic activity. We went through a lot of the information that, a lot of the other guys talked about too on the show. So I think essentially what they did is they had each of us talk about like the missing Douglas or the ghost ship and things like that. And they kind of grabbed snippets of, everybody talking about it to tell the story. And so I guess it was probably whoever told this section of the story the best, then they went with that. I'm not sure what their decision-making was on how they put it all together, but yeah, they're basically like, okay, tell us what you know about the Alaska Triangle. Tell us what you know about the missing Douglas. Tell us what you know about all these different things. The volatility of the land up there. And so we talked about all kinds of different things. They asked me about UFOs. Nothing I said about UFOs got used on the show. They did ask me about, government cover-ups and conspiracy. So a little bit of that got used, right at the end of the Missing Douglas episode. And so, yeah, it was kind of interesting what got used and what didn't get used. So they kind of had me talk about the earthquakes up there. That ended up being, my part as well. And then I'm trying to remember what all. And then, of course, my big feature was, of course, with the dowsing rods. They wanted somebody to kind of display, trying to track electromagnetic activity up there. And we're on the side of Flat Top Mountain. It's it really could have been just hit or, really it kind of was hit or miss. Let's see if we can find something up here. And there were some different grave sites that I thought that they might be interested in, because they were supposed to be, located near the different activity, hot spots and things like that, which I guess they weren't able to get that permission, but they chose a really beautiful site, a really beautiful location to film. It was like you could see the entire city of Anchorage down below. And when I was using the dowsing rods, you see me kind of as I'm kind of, walking across the mountain. There's this one part that I kept hitting that, the one rod, it was interesting. The one rod would stay straight, but the other would turn inward. And they kind of capture that a little bit on, on film there. And then I ended up, I would go back to that spot, because then it would straighten back out. So I went back to that spot, and then I'd go up and down the mountain, and it was, that same phenomenon was all up and down. So basically, I was able to draw a line from, the top of the mountain down to Anchorage. So some sort of electromagnetic current, a telluric current or what have you, going across the mountains down into Anchorage. So part of the triangle, maybe. So, Mike, did you get to see and chat with Cliff Barrickman while you were there? No, unfortunately, I didn't get to interact with any of the other cast while I was there. They did a lot of our stuff separately. So, like a couple of the guys that they interviewed and brought in, they didn't even end up in Alaska. They interviewed them elsewhere. But they wanted me on location to do some things there on Flat Top Mountain. So I was really just up there for a day. You could say 2 days, because I flew in the day prior, and then I was there all day filming. And they really worked with me on my schedule, because I had an event the following day after that, back in the St. Louis area in St. Charles. And so they worked with my schedule. We got all the filming done, and then I was essentially right back on the airplane. And time worked really weird for me, because I couldn't fall asleep on the airplane for whatever crazy reason. So I was up for probably, like 48 hours straight or something. It was something weird. It was more than 24 hours for sure. And it was one of those where I got to see the sun go dim, and then the sun came back up. So I never saw night that particular day. It was just all one long day. It was pretty crazy. And then I was there doing an event in St. Charles. So that was actually 1 year ago, like right about now. I think it would be like this coming weekend, a year ago is when we did that filming. And it was supposed to come out in, they said November-ish. Travel Channel lined it up for their Ghostober, and then they decided to push it back to November, out of the whole Ghostober thing, and then they delayed it until February. But it seemed to all work out, because February, winter, you're talking Alaska, the snow. People are really receptive to it, and so I guess Travel Channel knows what they're doing. They've kind of been at it a while now. Tom McNicholas, did you know the questions ahead of time? Yeah, I pretty much knew what they were going to be talking to me about. They kind of gave me a little packet of, these are the stories we're going to be talking about, which is good, because I had heard of several of the different things that we were talking about, but I didn't know a lot of the information going in. Kind of like when you go to a haunted location, it's like you have heard of a couple of the stories there, and then you go and you do some more research and find out some more, so that, like, I'm going to, I don't know, like the first time I ever did Mineral Springs, it's like, okay, I know a couple of things because I'd heard about it. I did a little reading online, what have you. Let's do some more research, dig in a little bit more, start talking to the people there while I'm there so that when I actually get on camera and start talking about a location, boom, I know what I'm talking about on camera. And then as we continue to do further investigation, now we know more. So the main thing that they wanted me up there talking about that I really didn't have to do any of that type of research for was like portals, vortices, electromagnetic activities, ley lines, all of that sort of stuff. I mean, that's basically how they found me, is that on the Haunted Road Media channel, I had posted a video on portals. What was interesting is that it was, at the time, it was one of our least viewed videos, but they liked the content of it. It's picked up some more views since then, since I've linked to it several times out of the Alaska Triangle videos that I've posted on the Haunted Road Media channel since then. But yeah, they liked the content of it. They knew what I was talking about. Of course, we had like some of the old Inside the Upside Down shows that we had done out there, talking about ley lines and energy grids and all of that. So they knew I knew what I was talking about. And so they asked me those type of questions up there. So I didn't have to research any of that. But like the Missing Douglas, I needed to learn a little bit more about, the stuff about some of the ships. I needed to, read a little bit more about. As far as the earthquake, I'd already known about the earthquake. I just needed to remember the year. Now, some of the stuff I actually experienced while I was up there, like I was talking about the volcanoes and the volatility of the land and things like that. So I was up there for, was it like a 6.5 or 6.7 earthquake? I always mix it up. I always say one and then it was the other. And I talked about it on the show how it was like a cannon that went off. It was something I experienced. When I first got off the plane in Anchorage that year, 1992, there had just been a volcano that summer, and ash was still falling from the sky, and we were having to cover up, computer equipment every night when I first got there. So those are things that I experienced while there. There were other things that I experienced that didn't make it onto the show. Yeah, that was a good question though. So Betty Lang, how many pages are in the contract you signed? Well, it depends. Each show is a little different. So that was Alaska Triangle. I think there was 1 or 2 pages that I signed. It wasn't a lot, really. They're basically non-disclosure stuff. Don't talk about things for a certain period of time, and then you're good to go after that. Same thing with like The Haunted and My Ghost Story. They're really just like a page, just a real like quick non-disclosure agreement. It's not like I was signing some mega deal to be on the, a host of a show for the next 5 years. It was nothing like that. It was a guest appearance. What was nice about Alaska Triangle, though, was that it was a little bit more than something like The Haunted or My Ghost Story, which were kind of like one-shot deals. With the Alaska Triangle, basically what I was told was that, I had a chance to be on a lot of the different episodes. I was told that I was going to, have 2 shows that I was going to be featured on quite a bit, and then I would kind of be sprinkled in here and there. So the 2 main shows was the one on the Missing Douglas. That was the very first episode, and the very last episode. Basically, my whole thing with the dowsing rods kind of culminated and ended the whole show. And the one that I was sprinkled in on was the what they called the Alaskan Titanic. So although they interviewed me about like everything, so all right, so that I think will wrap up the Alaska Triangle, because I have some different shows here. Just kind of step through some of these different things. We'll kind of go back in the day. I see Sharon Lang's question there. Mike, would you consider hosting a series? Yes, I absolutely would consider hosting a series. I've had several people tell me that I should be hosting a series, so I'll trust their judgment on that. But yeah, I would enjoy doing something like that. I enjoy doing this. If I didn't enjoy it, I wouldn't do it. So, yeah, I've been doing it for quite a few years now. All right, so we'll go to the haunted next. We'll kind of step through these in a bit of an order now for the next few, and we will do the Ghost Adventures thing a little bit later. I know Vanessa was kind of cackling at that, but I have some okay things to say about it. We'll get to Ghost Adventures. So this is The Haunted. This is actually the first show that I was on. This is the Monster in the Closet case, which was really one of the more well-known shows, one of the more well-known episodes of that show because of what happened. So this is just a still of me on there, but I was mostly there to talk about the history of the location, the deaths that happened in the home, a lot of the research that went into what happened. I did talk about, of course, some of my experiences that happened there. And, again, kind of interesting what they pick and choose. I have a little deleted scenes clip there. You guys have seen it before. We'll get into that. Sharon Lang, well, thank you. She says you have a broadcaster's voice and demeanor. I appreciate that. I'm just going to say real quick that I appreciate the compliment, but I if you knew me like when I was a kid, a lot younger, earlier adulthood, I was a shy kid growing up. I've basically made myself like this, and I believe is if you keep working on something and keep doing something and keep pushing, you can succeed and overcome obstacles that you have, like personal obstacles. One was me being very shy. I was timid of a lot of things early in life, which actually got me into a lot of fights because kids would see me as somebody they could pick on. They learned that they probably shouldn't, because I could defend myself, which was good. But I had stage fright as well. It's interesting because it's like I enjoyed doing this type of stuff, but I had stage fright and would get tongue tied. And I used to, like, early in my adulthood, I know this is off topic, but early in my adulthood, I would actually just call the telephone company and dispute a bill. I would write out my conversation, because if they asked me a question that would throw me off, I'd be like, and wouldn't know how to handle it. I was very socially awkward as a younger guy, and from doing a lot of this, I've overcome a lot of these different, I would say, I don't know, personality, social flaws that I had when I was younger. And what was really, again, I know it's off topic, what was really kind of touching to me is when my parents came to watch me speak a few years ago at the Parapsychon, when they had it in Lorain, Ohio, at St. Joseph's Hospital. Tom McNicholas, you're there. My parents got to watch me speak, and they saw me when I was younger. And after they were done, they were like, "Wow, you're really good. We're really proud of where you've come, after all these years." So, yeah, I appreciate it. I sincerely appreciate it when you guys say nice things about my voice or my demeanor or how comfortable I look or whatever, because it's taken a lot to get here, and so I absolutely appreciate it. All right, that said, The Haunted. So Chipper Cherry, when you do a show like The Haunted, where they put in demons, ghosts, etc., do you get to see them previous to the show, the green room stuff? Okay, so The Haunted, we're talking about The Haunted now. They didn't put anything in there. Now there's what they do is they do some like recreations, and they'll do some B-roll footage. So when you see a lot of when they're doing the family story, and it's like the whole first half of the show is the story of the family. There's a lot of recreations of that. In fact, they actually used a separate house to do a lot of those scenes. the Osborns had a kind of a cramped house, so it was a little awkward to kind of maneuver and do the recreations and what have you in that particular house. So they use a I forget the actual term that they use. Somebody down there might know it, but basically it was a substitute house that they used to do the recreations. And so you see some different things within there. Like I think one of the shots has a pool table, and it's like, yeah, the house that they actually lived wasn't going to have a pool table. But everything with our paranormal investigation in there, like this little clip here where you see us using equipment and things like that. That's all real footage that we shot. The crew themselves, when we did the actual cleansing night, because part of that investigation was cleansing, and that's what they wanted us to really get as far as the paranormal investigative team. They had us doing an EVP, they showed us doing an EVP session that we had captured earlier on and some stuff like that, and they included our footage in that. But then when we did the actual cleansing night, their crew for the haunted, it was a couple of guys with handy cams. And so here's one of the guys here. He's just holding a little Sony handy cam. They just try to keep it real and raw. Here's one of the other guys, again, a little Sony handy cam. And this show was trying to keep it as real as possible. Everything that we did was, very, it was on the up and up. It was legit. Everything that you saw happened. So, here's Carl doing a blessing over Taliesin. This is the moment where when he did the blessing over her, she doubled over in pain, like she got punched in the gut. I got the EVP that said die. Now, the one thing that drove me nuts about The Haunted was that they took my EVP die and put it elsewhere in the show. They actually had that as part of our investigation footage, that because we heard the word die, that's why we had to go and do the cleansing, which wasn't the case. We got a lot of different EVPs. We did the cleansing because of how much this entity was affecting Taliesin. I mean, other members of the house saw there were a number of things going on within the home. It was terrorizing her, the cat, all this, different stuff. She was becoming very, very oppressed by this entity, so we needed to get it out. We did end up deeming that one a demon, and she was being oppressed at the time. There are some signs that it may have been trying to get to the point of possession, but it never got that far. So we did this part of the investigation, the cleansing, really. Carl did the blessing over her. We had that crazy moment. That's where I got the EVP. Other parts you did not see was stuff like this. Carl's blessing the door, which I can understand why they wouldn't put this in the show. And they only have like 42 minutes to tell a show. Quarantine Ghost, it was a wraith, right? Yes. Carl ended up dubbing it a wraith. He and Chris Borthwick, you see the back of Chris's head here. He was our occult specialist at the time. And they're the two that dubbed it a wraith. But yeah, Carl's blessing the door. And so basically what was happening was that back door kept blowing open. After he did the blessing over Taliesin and she fell to the floor, we got her back up. She was okay. This back door kept blowing open. It would blow open, we'd close it, it'd blow open again, close it again, it'd blow open again. We ended up having to deadbolt the whole thing because just closing it regular wasn't helping. And that ended up being fine, but he did a blessing over the door. Also in Taliesin's bedroom, we had a tri-field meter set up by where she was mostly seeing the red-eyed entity in the closet. That's why it was called Monster in the Closet. The tri-field meter was going off like crazy at the time. So none of that is in the show either. So, the show is like very limited as far as what they can include. And that's something that people don't understand about a lot of these television shows is that, these teams, whether it's Ghost Adventures or Ghost Hunters or whatever, they're there for several days, filming, researching, going to different locations, whether it's, they might hit a couple locations in a town, or they might spend, several days at, one building, and it all gets condensed down to 42 minutes. So with us, we had the one big cleansing night with all kinds of stuff going on. Our segment only ended up being, half the show, about 20 minutes, because they had the whole first half of the show was the family story. Yeah, we had, hours worth of the cleansing. We also had all of our previous paranormal investigation footage, and we had investigated there like 6 times. So there was a lot that they had to just like take pieces of and put together to complete the story. And that's really what they're going for is creating a story out of, what they have, what works for what they're trying to tell. So, and we'll get to that actually when we talk about Ghost Adventures. So, grand old folks, what year was The Haunted made? So that was 10 years ago now. The episode aired in 2011. We filmed it in 2010. Our first investigation with the Osbournes was, I want to say it was that May or June. So we're coming up like right on the 10-year mark when we first started investigating that house. It was a while ago now. Wow. So that's Carl blessing the door. Everything that happened here in the backyard, this was all crazy. What really doesn't come through in that backyard is how strong the wind had become. They showed the cats running around in a circle, which that was really crazy. The cats were circling and circling and circling us. The wind was going absolutely nuts. And what became really crazy after that, after we had pushed the entity out and everything settled down, I went to the side yard to talk to the family, and we're making remarks about the wind, like, wow, that wind was really crazy, right? And they're all like, what wind? They're just in the side yard. It's not a big place. And they experienced no wind. And in the backyard, we're all our hair's whipping around and just everything's going crazy. So, yeah, it was pretty nuts. And then I mentioned stuff that they couldn't include, deleted scenes. So there was a really interesting moment with one of the cats there. This is actually where I saw the black mist, like a black cloud in Talison's room. This was deleted from the actual show. They gave the family a DVD that had the entire show on it with none of the like you see here in let me just do this. All the stuff where it says, all the branding, Animal Planet HD, River Monsters, new season coming up in 9 days. None of that stuff is on it. It is just, the show. And it also had several deleted scenes on there, and also, interview clips that never aired and things like that. And so they gave me a copy of that. And so as part of my Shadow Person presentation, I show that clip with the cat. So there's a lot of stuff that just doesn't make it. Victoria Monday, aren't portals doors? Maybe it's why they kept flying open. As far as that door, I think what was going on with that door at the time, we were really starting to agitate the entity that was there. I mean, our purpose was to get rid of it. And so when Taliesin was in that room and yelling and shouting at something that nobody could see, but we knew something was there, it was really affecting her. And so Carl's aim at that point was to put white energy onto Taliesin, to bless her and make sure that she was protected. And what ended up happening was this entity just flipped its shit. So it basically punched her in the gut. I truly believe it tried to kill her. I mean, the EVP said die, and it literally like punched her in the gut. So at that point, it was trying to do her harm. She was okay, though. Carl apparently had protected her enough that she was able to get up. She was okay. So then all of a sudden, it starts, blowing that back door open, maybe trying to scare us. We don't know. It's doing some stuff. It's doing crazy things out in the back in her bedroom. That meter's going crazy back there. So basically, this entity became extremely, extremely agitated. And then we get outside. We push the thing outside. And as we are continuing to push and push and push, the weather, the wind is going nuts out there. So that was all that spirit. That was that energy from that spirit that was extremely agitated, and it did finally leave. And it never came back, by the way. So it was actually it turned out to be a good story. All right. So, so there we go. Roselle C. Rowe. Mike, how do they find you to ask you on these shows? Great question. Like I said, for the Alaska Triangle, they found me they found me from the portal video that I had done on the Haunted Road Media YouTube channel. So they were looking for somebody specifically to talk about that type of phenomenon: portals, vortices, electromagnetic activity, ley lines, all that. They saw that video. They thought I spoke well, so they got a hold of me, talked to me a little bit. We did a little Skype interview, and they asked a question on that Skype interview about Alaska. So I say something about the Alaska Triangle in that interview, and automatically it's like, okay, he's our guy. He knows something about the Alaska Triangle. I spent 3 years up there, so that's basically what sealed the deal for that. Wild Dream Entertainment, a class act. They've probably been the best so far that I've worked with. For the Haunted, that was the team that I was with at the time. The leader of that team, I don't know how she first got involved with that production company, because that relationship began before I came onto that team. They had already done an episode, the Leave or Die House, El Dorado, Oklahoma. I guess that was the year before. And so she had already established that relationship. Again, I'm not really sure how. I don't know if she sought them out, or if she saw, I don't know, if an ad that they had put out, or they looked through, team websites. I don't know. But when I got with the team, she had basically put together 5 cases, potential cases for them to air. They were going to go with 3. 2 of the cases backed out. This one still agreed to go ahead with the case and have it on television. So some people, even though they start through the process, like I said, we had 5 potential cases. 3 of them were going to go onto the Haunted, and 2 of them decided, I don't think we want to be on TV. I don't think we want our house. We don't want our neighbors. We don't want our friends to know about this going on with us, which is, hey, that's fine. I totally understand privacy. For my ghost story, which we're going to get to here in just a moment, we'll go ahead and start on that. So for my ghost story, basically at the time, they've cast a wide net. They were emailing all kinds of people. I was one of them, obviously, but they were sending emails to, paranormal teams. They were getting on people's Facebook, just, all over, and looking for people to talk about their paranormal experiences. They would do 4 of these per episode. And so they needed a lot of stories. And so I ended up with an email in my inbox one day, asking me to submit a story. And so I did. I had a couple that I tossed their way of experiences that I had had. And the main thing that they wanted was some sort of visual evidence. And I went with Blackbear Church, where we saw the crawler, in Olive Township, Oklahoma. And that was an interesting experience from a number of perspectives. It's for one thing, because of that wide net that they cast, what's interesting is there are several people that were on my ghost story and only my ghost story that now say that they're like a paranormal celebrity. And it's like, well, come on. They went and got anybody and everybody to be on that show to tell a story. So no, you're not a paranormal celebrity for being on my ghost story. But, enjoy the experience because it was pretty cool. I mean, they did a pretty good job. I mean, they flew us out to L.A. In where did they put us up? It was they put us up in the DoubleTree Hotel. They had the classic green room and everything there, which was very cool. And so so this is me telling my ghost story. But so here's Kathy Nance and I in the green room. They got like the makeup and everything going on. It was a lot of fun. They were in that cup is wine. They were serving us wine to calm our nerves so that we would, I guess, talk better on screen. So it was definitely it was cool. They had the snacks, they had the wine. They were a nice group of people. There was somebody else there from Ohio that came into the green room at the time. I was in Oklahoma, but there was somebody from Ohio that came in, and I remember I can't remember who specifically it was. But we were chatting about the state of Ohio. I remember that. Because they're filming so many different stories all in one day, there's a lot of people kind of in and out of the room. So Victoria Monday, when are we having the Mike Ricksecker Film Fest, like a director's cut program? We could look into something like that. That might be interesting. So the green room there was a lot of fun in LA. What was interesting about this? So this is the church where the crawler is at during the day. However, we couldn't use this location to actually film because they wanted us to do some recreations. They needed B-roll footage, all of that sort of stuff. So they flew us out for the interview segment. We filmed all that. And then they had another guy come out, one single guy, to do the recreations and B-roll footage. But, of course, you need a waiver and permission from the location to film there. We were working on that. This is where this story gets really interesting. We were working on that. However, I had put out on my, before the Haunted Road Media YouTube channel, there was the Mike Ricksecker YouTube channel. There's also an old Society of the Haunted one as well that also, they both had like the same videos on there for a while on the Blackbear Church, which became the Church of Darkness. And the owners, at first, when they saw that, they were like, oh, wow, so our church is going to get recognized and et cetera, et cetera. I mean, they've had kids out there vandalizing the place for years. They saw my video in which I talked about the possible occult activity out there that we had found evidence back on that one pedestal in that room. Many of you have heard me tell the story about the crawler and all the local urban legends about it being conjured. And if it was back there on that pedestal because we had found a little bit of evidence, maybe, of occult activity going on back there. Somehow, some way, they took that to mean I was saying the parishioners of the church were practicing the occult. And it's like, no. No. I mean, obviously, it's after the fact. Apparently, at least according to one of the other guys in the team, because he had talked with one of them, and they were pretty pissed off. They were talking about like suing me or whatever. It's like, I didn't say that. Go back and watch it. I didn't say the parishioners were practicing occult things out there. No, it was others after the fact, possibly. So we couldn't use the property, the actual church, which was a real shame. So we still have to do recreations, and we still have to get the B-roll footage. So I got a hold of the 101 Ranch Old Timers Association. We had done some investigations up at the old 101 Ranch, because the basement there does have some visual similarities to the basement at Blackbear. So here we go. So this is the under the church, the basement of the church, where we saw the crawler, where we had all of that activity going on. The actual 101 Ranch basement, where is it? I think it's here. So This is okay. This is the Great White House, the remnants of the Great White House, the foundation that's left. The actual house itself is gone. They tore that down like back in the 30s. And this is the actual basement of the 101 Great White House. And so there's the guy with the big fro getting the recreations and B-roll. And so basically he's getting shots of us investigating. So any of the things that aired on my ghost story with us investigating were just complete recreations. So there he is getting, them using the equipment, stuff like this. So it's every show does it a little bit different. They're basically, the way my ghost story worked was, you're going to tell your story, my ghost story, right? You're going to tell your story. Every once in a while, they would clip in some like real video footage, depending on the visual evidence that was submitted. When we saw the crawler, nobody was running a video camera at the time. We had audio going, no video. So we didn't have that visual stuff that they were looking for. So they recreated all of it to tell that story. Like in the story, we had the psychic medium suggest to sing the hymns and do the prayers and all that. Well, the girl here on the left, Destiny, was the stand-in for the psychic medium. And this is everybody who was there that night for the recreations. So Kathy, Destiny, Chris, me, and Johnny. And thank God they did not include us singing. Oh my God, that would have been terrible. But he actually filmed us singing, which was nuts. So we did that for a little while. And the one thing that didn't work, because that worked. This down here, that worked as a stand-in for this. It's not too far off. It's believable. What didn't work though was the cemetery. Now, the Blackbear Cemetery is actually kind of big. It's a decent size, and it's right across a dirt road from the church. And this is where I got some of those crazy EVPs, like my teeth are warm and stuff like that. But the cemetery that we had to use that's down the road from the 101 Ranch is small. So this is a clip from the show of me walking through that cemetery. Yeah, it's quite different than, say, this, which is the actual real cemetery itself. So, so Betty Lange, how many teams has Mike belonged to? 2, really. It was OKPRI, Oklahoma Paranormal Research and Investigations. And then we broke off, all of us except the woman who ran that team, and created Society of the Haunted. Society of the Haunted still exists today as me. So, it's had, Society of the Haunted has had like several different incarnations, groups of people running it. We had a nice little team there for a while. My, I guess would be the last year that I was in Oklahoma. It was a pretty tight-knit group, but then I moved to Maryland. Kathy moved to Texas, and the team that was still there in Oklahoma tried to blow the team up real big. Like, they all of a sudden brought in a whole bunch of, people onto the team, and it just like imploded. I was running the website, had the domain and all that stuff, so I hung on to the rights to use Society of the Haunted and the logo and all that stuff. So that's what you've kind of seen here the last several years is Society of the Haunted is the paranormal investigative arm of Haunted Road Media. I pretty much do everything under the Haunted Road Media moniker now, but sometimes you'll still see Society of the Haunted out there, and that's pretty much me at this point. So, in Quarantine Ghost, throwing down a link to A Walk in the Shadows to get that book. I appreciate that because that's the story out of that church is the crawler story, the Church of Darkness. So, it is it's probably one of the most haunted places that I have actually been to and have investigated. So Robert Hanna, is the cemetery haunted? Yeah, the cemetery is haunted. We did get some interesting activity and EVPs there. Logan, the one guy that's in this photo here. So those trees that are behind him off to the left. The reason we started investigating here, Logan has been investigating in Oklahoma for years and years and years. And so we were investigating one night at a residence. He was telling us this story about Blackbear and some of the different crazy activity that he was getting there, experiences that he had. And so he brought, Kathy is the woman here holding the camera. He brought Kathy and I out there one night after this investigation that we'd done at a residence, and kind of got the crash course of the location. And that was the night that I got the EVP, My Teeth Are Warm, out of that cemetery. It was also, there was a lot of crazy things going on that night. So it was, the coyotes were going crazy that night. So we ended up, if you can believe this, it's like, I don't know, 20 feet across the road from the church to the cemetery. We drove from the church to the cemetery because the coyotes are getting closer. We actually went to the cemetery for safety because the gate closes. So we went in there, closed ourselves into the cemetery to stay safe from the coyotes. When we did our little tour in there, our little investigation in there, Logan and Kathy went out to the car. I was in the cemetery doing one last sweep, and that's where I got the My Teeth Are Warm EVP. When I went back to the car, we were hearing footsteps coming down the road. We thought one of the locals had possibly seen us, and we were out there cameras flashing and all that. Okay, somebody's going to come down and ask what we're doing, maybe try to shoo us off, what have you. And we're waiting for them to come. Nobody's coming. It's like, all right, we'll drive down there. We'll just approach them and say, yeah, it was us. We went all the way down to the next intersection, which was probably a quarter mile off. Nobody. So, it's a really interesting location. The cemetery is definitely haunted as well. And Candy Orton, right down there in the chat, didn't you hear those footsteps coming down the road toward you? Yep. That was that night, the very first night that I was at Blackbear. Yep. All right, so let's talk, because we're almost at our hour mark, so we're going to go a little long here. RenTV. Now, this is interesting. So the question was asked earlier about how I get on these things. This one was interesting because it was Russia. They sent me an email. They had seen my video on Helltown in Ohio, the Boston Mills area. So they wanted to interview me for their television show. And then the woman that I was talking to, Olga, asked me, because she started checking into some of my stuff, and she asked me, well, there are some other shows, some other topics that we'd like to cover. Could you talk about these other subjects as well? And so the television show on there in English is basically Mysteries of Mankind, if we're translating it correctly. They cover a lot of different things. It's just not paranormal, supernatural. It's also, real world things. I mean, they'll go back into history for things. They'll do, crazy things with, show interesting stories with animals or current events that are just nutty. Just a lot of weird type of stuff. And it can be it's all over the world. What's interesting about this show is, I guess from what she told me, they air this thing twice a day, 2 separate airings of it per day, 5 days per week. So the ones that I have linked to, there's 4 of them that aired on the nighttime show. That's their prime time show. And so they actually link to those on their website. You can watch them out there. And then on their YouTube channel, they put them out there as well. But the one that they show during the day, the daytime one, they don't post anywhere. You have to watch it on their network. So if you're in Russia and they are the number one, if you can believe, this is really weird. They are a I guess they're the largest privately owned, federally operated television show in Russia. I don't even know how that works. How are you private and federal at the same time? I don't know, but that's what they call themselves. They're really big out there, and but you have to watch the daytime one on their network, and then they post the primetime one. So I guess I was on, because they interviewed me several times for a number of different stories, and there's a lot of it I haven't been able to see or watch and can't link anybody to because it only aired in Russia. But even with linking it, and you can see right here, there's no English subtitles at all. It's all in Russian. They dub over my voice in Russian, so you can kind of hear me speaking in English in the background a little bit. But it's somebody speaking in Russian over it. So I know some of you have clicked into those links when I posted them, and it's like, okay, this is great. There's just a story that Mike is telling about some haunted location, and we have no idea what he's talking about. So it was a really interesting experience. Yeah, so that we did that for about a year there, 8 months, something like that. I don't know if Olga stopped working for them or what have you, because I haven't heard from them in a while. So it was probably a year ago that my last episode with them aired, and I haven't heard from them since, which is fine, because it was just it was an interesting experience. It really was. We were having to deal with the time difference. There was like a good 12 hours time difference. And of course the language barrier. So Olga would hit me up. Hey, can you do a story on whatever topic and have it to me by this time on Friday or whatever it was? And it's like, well, that time on Friday for them is a totally different time for me. So it was like I'd have to do some math to figure out when they needed that by. I would always say, yeah, sure, I'll have it to you. And of course, I'd have like our shows going on, or I'd be on the road or whatever. I'd always figure it out and get it to them. So, no, they did not fly me to Russia. So basically the way that worked, at first we tried to do it over Skype sessions, but it didn't really work out so well. Skype, whatever. So what I ended up doing for that was I would tape it on my camera. I know it's funny we say tape and there's no tape. It's all memory cards. I'd tape it on the camera. I would edit it down to tell the story, basically like I would do anything like my Friday Night Ghost Rights or what have you. Basically with the information that they needed. And then I would put it up on Google Drive and she would go grab it. So, that's all you need. We could do this across, thousands and thousands of miles across countries and not even leave your home. So, yeah, nothing with that was on location. That was all strictly interview in front of a camera. Right here. Sitting right here. I ended up removing that. When I did the first couple, I had that up and they would just, they would blur it out. So it was like, well, I'd save them the trouble and just give them an all black background. So Candy Orton, put a Russian translator app on your phone and listen and make sure it's really what you said. Yeah, I could try something like that. And where's the link? I'd have to hunt down those links. I posted them on Facebook and I tweeted all that stuff and everything. I have that. I have it out there somewhere. So I should probably link it to, I should probably link it on my website somewhere. You'd think I would have done something like that already. From Betty Lange, did you get any fan mail from it? So, okay, it's interesting. Yes, actually I did. So I have to say that there was an uptick in people from Russia following me on Instagram, and I did get a request for a signed photograph from a fan in Russia who actually does watch some of our stuff. She has a little trouble because her English is not so good. But that's pretty cool. So I got a fan in Russia. All right. Or maybe a couple at least. So it was pretty cool. So I would do it again if they asked. So Alina is Russian. Awesome. Very cool. Very cool. All right. We have one more to talk about. And we're going to do it like right at the hour mark. One more to talk about. Because basically after the Russia thing was Alaska Triangle, but in the middle of all of this stuff was Ghost Adventures at the Stone Lion Inn. So this did not air. This was filmed but never aired. Stone Lion Inn was my absolute favorite haunted house. Love this place. It's in Guthrie, Oklahoma. I mean, come on, look at it. Just look at it. Screams I'm haunted. It is, to me, it is just the epitome of a haunted house. You walk in, it's very creepy cool. You're like hearing footsteps. It has the creepy ambiance, all that stuff. It's awesome. Yeah, I filmed with these guys. You know what's really funny about this photo though, is I have seen it elsewhere on the internet with me cropped out of it. Like, seriously? Like, somebody stole my photo off of maybe Facebook or Twitter or whatever, cropped me out of it. Like, hey, here's a cool, photo of the Ghost Adventures crew. Oh my God, seriously. Okay. So, so what happened with Ghost Adventures? Because this did not air, and it became a thing on the Haunted Road Media channel with on an Edge of the Rabbit Hole episode that we did. That I totally get that not everything that you do for television is going to end up on television. I mean, there's a lot of things that just never even make it out the front door. Like last year with the Alaska Triangle, I had like 4 different things in the works. And only one happened, and that was the Alaska Triangle. So a lot of things just, either they go in a different direction or the project never gets off the ground or whatever. With Ghost Adventures, they did air the episode. They decided to tell a different story. My beef with it, for those of you that remember, was that they never said anything to me about it. They never said, hey, we're sorry. We appreciate you coming out. And I was coming from Ohio to Oklahoma at the time. It was a long drive. And I was also doing contract work at the time, so I had to take a couple days with no pay to go do that. But yeah, they never sent any sort of email, never called. A number of the different guys had my number and had called at different times to ask me things about the house or experiences that I had or anything. Nobody gave like a common courtesy to say, hey, we appreciate you having you out, but we're not airing your part. I had somebody that was doing some PR work for me at the time set up a watch party in Indiana. Again, I was in Ohio. She set it up in Indiana. There was like a lot of, like advertising. There's a lot of social media posts about this watch party that was gonna happen with me on Ghost Adventures, and they didn't air any of it. So that was my beef. Again, I totally understand that it wasn't the story they wanted to tell. I mentioned earlier that they put together a story, and the things that I had to say about the Stone Lion Inn weren't part of the story that they wanted to tell. They wanted their story to talk about Elmer McCurdy, and that basically what they were trying to do was say that because Becky was taking people out to the cemetery, Guthrie has a lot of interesting history from the Old West. One of these is this Elmer McCurdy legend. He's not even from Guthrie. It's just where his body ended up after it had been a mummy. Went like around the country as a sideshow for basically like a circus act. Ended up in California. They had forgotten that it was an actual human mummy because they had painted it all up and they were just calling it the dummy at the time. During a filming of The $6 Million Man, one of the crew accidentally knocked the arm off of this thing, and they discovered, oh my God, this thing is human. They ended up tracing it back to this outlaw who had been killed north of there, near the Kansas-Oklahoma border. And they ended up basically putting him into the cemetery there at Boot Hill, gave him a nice little stone and everything. So Becky would take the people up to Boot Hill to see Elmer McCurdy and the other outlaws that were up there. And so Ghost Adventures, their story was that because Becky would do this, that Eleanor McCurdy grew an attachment to her and would haunt the Stone Lion Inn. That was, I mean, they talked about the little girl, you know, and they tried to interact with her during the show and all that. But my story didn't jive with anything that they were trying to tell. So they nixed it. I get it. What they did leave in the show was this. So this is like in the very opening segment of the show when they're just, you know, gearing things up. It's not me, but this is some recreation footage that they had created that would have been, you know, to lead into my story, basically, which this is in front of the fireplace where that wave of energy hit me and I almost passed out. So there's a better shot of the library, and that's the fireplace there. Absolutely beautiful. Yeah, I absolutely love that place. So they kept this little piece in at the very beginning of the show. And didn't explain it because they had it dubbed over, I think with Becky's voice at the time. And this is on screen for like all of 2 seconds. But I did get to observe, you know, how they filmed and everything. And they're basically like running around. I mean, there's Aaron with the camera. You know, they interviewed me and then they were off and doing stuff. You know, I'll say, I mean, my observation from just being there one night was Zach was very meticulous. That he had a plan, like we're gonna do this, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do this, and he was on it. You know, when they did my interview of it, they had like these different lights that were cast up on me and that sort of stuff. And that was probably another part that didn't work out. I have a tendency to talk with my hands a little bit, and with the way he had the lights set up to cast on me, I'm sitting there talking with my hands, explaining stuff, and it was kind of funny because he's like trying to explain that he wants me to stop talking with my hands. He's like, well, there's, you know, we have a little issue with it, and he's kind of like beating around the bush a little bit, and I'm like, my hands? He's like, yes. I'm like, okay, I can put them in my pocket. That's fine. So that was a little funny. Yeah, and we went out to the foyer area to talk about my story there. What was kind of interesting was as we wrapped up there in the library talking about all that, Jay was like, so, you know, is there anything else that happened to you there? And Zach was like, we'll get to that. I was like, oh, okay. I don't know. So the crew was really cool. The crew was very, very nice. Chatted with Aaron a little bit. Aaron's a cool guy. Didn't really have much of a chance to talk to, you know, Jay or Billy or whatever. And like I said, Zach was just boom, boom, boom. We've got, you know, this to do, this to do, this to do. He was kind of like a machine, you know. And then we stopped to take the photo. But did I have anything else from this? Did I have another slide? I thought I had another slide. Oh yeah, the other thing. Okay, this is one other thing that did irk me. So this photograph was asked for me by, it was somebody else on the production team. It wasn't Zach or any of the Ghost Adventures crews, from somebody from the production team. You know, they had, of course, seen my video. This is basically how I got on there, is they had seen my video on the Stone Lion Inn talking about my ghost stories and experiences at the Stone Lion Inn. Jeff Belanger does a lot of the research and background stuff for them. And so Jeff reached out to me and you know, asked me if I would be, you know, interested, you know, on the show. He said, hey, I saw your video, you know, thought it was pretty good. You know, would you be interested in going out there and talking about that? I was like, well, yeah, sure. You know, and at first they were a little bit concerned because of the distance. And that was, you know, one of the things that left me a little miffed. It's like, I went all the way out there for this. You guys could have at least said something about me not being on there. This was the other thing that kind of miffed me, was that from that video, I had this photograph. They didn't know where to get it. This was in, I think it was the Oklahoman. You can see the date there, 1916. And this is the Houghton family. And this is one of those pieces of information from my research that helped narrow down. Many people believe that the ghost that haunts there, the little girl spirit that haunts there, is Irene. She shows up in the census records in 1910. By 1920, no more. She died, but we don't know when. There's not a record of her death. This photo here narrows down the gap a little bit more because she's not in this photograph from 1916. So somewhere between 1910 and 1916, she passed away. They wanted this photo from me. I gave it to them. Again, they have a special thanks section at the end of the show. It's like, could you maybe at least? No. So that too, it was like, geez, guys, really? Okay. So that was unfortunate. Again, like I have said before, I realized they had a story to tell. My story didn't fit their story. But just say something. And maybe for that photograph, just throw it in, special thanks, because I have a whole list of, different places and people and all that. Just throw the name in there. Whatever. So it is what it is. All right. So see if you guys have any questions. So Robert Hanna, did they seem nice? Yeah. While we were there, everything was cool. Like I said, chatted with Aaron a little bit. He was pretty cool. The crew was really nice. They were back there, chatting with us and, always asking us if there was anything that they could get us. And, they're really good. The rest of the guys, I know that, like when we got there, Zach was interviewing Becky and then he ended up interviewing Michelle. And so Billy was kind of in and out, going over some of the interview footage for, listening for EVPs and stuff like that, which, apparently when he listened over something from Michelle's interview, then he heard something, which was kind of unfortunate because we had just Vanessa was there. She wasn't there to be interviewed or whatever. She was just there to show support. And she and I had talked Michelle Don off a ledge. Michelle had, even though she works there, she doesn't ever want to stay there alone because of an incident that she had many, many years ago. And we kind of helped explain some things to her to make her feel better about it. And then when they did the interview with her, they got this EVP that, told Michelle F you. And it's like, I've never gotten that there. I've never gotten anything really hostile there. The stories that I tell about feeling the wave of energy, the photograph falling off the wall, the slam of the drawer. It was all interesting. I can't ever say it was hostile. It's, we don't know why. And that was one of the questions Zach asked me. Had you ever experienced poltergeist activity like that there before? And that was the only night. The other times I investigated, they were really rather mild. You might get some EVPs. You definitely hear the footsteps all the time. That sort of stuff. And you would see some shadows in and out of doors. So there's shadow people there. But that was the only night with kind of quote unquote poltergeist activity. And so for her to get that kind of EVP, never got an EVP like that there before. I investigated there several times, and I know others who have investigated there many times, so it was kind of unusual. Everybody that was part of the crew was nice. They were very cordial and all that. So everything about filming that night was cool. So so Mike, the little girl that died there between 1910 and 1916, there's no grave. No, I'm not really sure what happened to her, unfortunately. So, in fact, it took them a while to figure out that it was Irene. There was, what was her name? There was another, one of the other daughters that for years and years and years, people were saying that it was she who haunted the house. And, it was actually Ghost Hunters when they came in during their season 2 that they did some research and discovered that no, that girl grew up, became a woman, and lived, but there was this other girl that it could possibly be, this girl Irene, who shows up on the census records. Now there is definitely for sure a little girl that haunts there. Becky's son would always play with her in the third floor. There's like this huge open room, and then under the eaves, they're basically closets, but they went in under the eaves, and he would have like his toys stored there, and she would play with him inside these closets. But a lot of people can hear her running around, laughing. They'll get EVPs of her like all over the house. So she's there. So they've since figured out that it's Irene, but to try to pinpoint specific information on her, other than that she was alive in 1910, that's all we know. It's just, sometime before 1916 she passed away. There's no grave. And the thing that's interesting about that is, the house, there had been a house next door that had been theirs, and they ended up building the house. That's a stone lying in now, and the family ended up moving in there. And basically, she died. When she died, it would have been in that other house. And so her spirit has like moved from that site into here. So basically she followed the family. When she passed away, she was with the family and followed them from the old house to the new house. So kind of interesting. Was there a tornado there? Well, it's Oklahoma. There have been a lot of tornadoes in and around the area, of course. Tom McNicholas makes an interesting point. No grave may mean tuberculosis. And that's always possible. That's something that we forget about. Is tuberculosis was a really big thing at the time. And so she could have ended up at a tuberculosis hospital and been buried there, maybe even in a mass grave. So that's tragic to think about. But you're right, Tom. That could absolutely be. Good idea. Might have to look into that. So, all right. Let's go ahead and wrap it up because we are well over our hour mark here. And so, yeah, as far as, okay, I see the question that a little more clarity. Is there a way to check to see if tornado happened during that time? There are people disappear in tornadoes. I mean, they have records of when tornadoes came through. So that could be looked at as well. So either one of those, I have a sneaking suspicion it's more along the lines of tuberculosis. I mean, it seems it was an illness anyway, from what I recall. She had died of some illness, and then her spirit followed. So at least that's the story. All right, so yeah, let's go ahead and wrap it up. Want to thank, of course, Quarantine Ghost for moderating the chat. Absolutely appreciate that. Remember, we are going to be live here this Thursday at 7:30 Eastern Time. Alexandra Holzer and her mother, Countess Catherine, are going to be with us. Talking all things Holzer. So, we're talking about her mother and the things that she has experienced. Her artwork, which she would do art for Hans and his investigations, and so we'll be talking about a variety of different things. So it'll be very, very interesting. So let's go ahead and get to first of all, the Patreon patrons. Deep Down the Rabbit Hole Patreon patrons: Tom McNicholas, B3 Aerospace, Pamela Queen, Joe Chandler, Andrew Cox, Dustin Samario, and David Yeisley. Thank you all very, very much for being Deep Down the Rabbit Hole Patreon patrons. Let's get to the participants tab here. And that would include, we got Candy Orton at the top, Kathy Salento, thank you very much. Chipper Terry and Christopher Stanton, thanks for joining us again tonight. Haunted Road Media's Fairy Queen, Diane Hilbert, thanks for joining us once again. It's Grand Old Folks, Betty Lange, Greg Renkin, Helen Espinoza, thank you all very much. Greg Greg, I already said that. It scrolled up or scrolled down on me. Katie Palmer, Nisaba, Robert Hanna, Rosella C. Rowe. Thank you all very much. There's Sharon Lane. Great to see you again. Tom McNicholas. Thank you as always. Tim Schoen and Victoria Monday. And if Guha's out there, then we thank you as well. I seem to miss her from time to time. Kind of like with Diane Hilbert, like she would not show up in the participants tab for like the longest time for whatever reason. Let's see, B3 Aerospace, Katie Palmer. I think I've said everybody here. Robert Hanna, great to see you. And I'm just kind of scrolling back through to see if there's anybody I missed because the participants tab does not grab everybody. All right. Well, if I missed you, I do apologize. I try to get everybody. But you know how it goes here with the way this works. So, alrighty. That'll do it. People are asking about the Haglin. I don't know. I haven't seen the Haglin for a while either. There's Andrew and his trucking gnomes. Good to see you, Andrew Cox. Hope you're doing all right on the road there. All right. So that'll do it for tonight. Appreciate everybody hanging out. Hope everybody is staying safe, and we will see you Thursday night, 7:30 Eastern, right here. Till next time.